Man, Brian Broaddus, we was looking over Dane Brugler's mock draft a couple of weeks ago, like last month or something like that. And shouts out to Dane Brugler for joining us on the last edition of the Doing All Right. Y'all can go over there and check that out. But man, Brian Broaddus, we was looking over that mock, and it was a lot of names that we knew because, it was in the PFF list. So we were kind of aware of who Dane was, listing. But then he had this name, Monroe Freeling, up there. And I looked at Brian. I say, man, Brian, I ain't gonna lie, I don't know who the hell Monroe is. And Monroe, I didn't know that they were still naming babies Monroe in the damn 2000s, Brian. I didn't know that they were still doing that. Yeah. But Monroe Freeling, Monroe Freeling, offensive tackle from Georgia. Now, Brian, I'm about to say a lot of things you don't like. You know what I'm saying? But there's some good things about Monroe Freeling. First, let me say, I think that he is going to be sold on the idea that he's kind of I can do everything kind of guy. He may not be elite in any kind of way, Brian, but he is a guy that can do a little bit of everything. He does move decently. He does have good feet. He has some decent lineman feet, like he knows where to put his feet. They use him a lot in the run game. They pull him a lot. He climbs to the next level pretty decently, right? Down blocks, hooks, and all this kind of stuff, scoops. He's pretty decent there. So I think just by his general athleticism, I think he'll be drafted kind of highly because teams kind of like that, Brian. I want to be careful when I talk about his athleticism, though, Brian, because I don't want to make him seem like he's a slow-footed player, right? But he's not Fano or Lomu. I think those guys have much better foot quickness, right? But I do think he has better feet than Dunker or Proctor. So he's kind of like a balanced guy. One analogy I always use, Brian, you may not notice because you're an older gentleman, but in Mario Kart, you got your big carts that's powerful, but they don't move all that well. Then you got your fast carts that drive real fast, but they aren't powerful. They're not heavy, right? But then you got your balanced Mario guys. They just do a little bit of everything. We ain't fast, but we kind of fast. We ain't heavy, but we just kind of, I think Monroe Freeling is in the middle of everything. Except I think when it comes to his power, I think he's a little more on the left side. I don't see a very powerful player, Brian. I see an aggressive player. I see a player that tries to finish, and I do love that. But he just doesn't bring all the ass whoop that, some of these other guys have, Brian. You're going to hate this. If it doesn't work out at tackle for him, I think he's big enough to play guard for you. You know what I'm saying? And some team in the league may play him at guard first and then try to move him to tackle or whatever. Brian doesn't like flex, but I think he does have flex because he's not a small tackle. Like he's probably going to be like 315, 310 or something like that. And some people like their guards smaller than that. You know what I mean? So as far as Monroe Freeling, Brian Broaddus, I like the player. He cool. I don't think he's a guy that fits what Dallas is needing or looking for or anything like that. He may go in the 20s or something like that, Brian. But I don't think he's a guy that we should be talking about in Cowboy land. But if you want these other teams, back of the first round, early second, he's a 2 on my board. And you need an offensive tackle or maybe even a guard. I think he's an option for some people, Brian.
Yeah, I have him in the 3rd actually myself.
Okay.
I wasn't my seconds are Proctor, Alabama, and Lomu from Utah, and then Freeling and Dunker and then other guys that we're going to get to as in a later date. There's an Ohio State tackle that we're going to probably have to talk about, but I was not overall, impressed by his play. And then, and I've seen where Daniel Jeremiah has him as a top 50 guy. I saw where Dane had him, getting selected. And as you mentioned, you and I were kind of like, whoa, where did that name come from? And you're right. You watch the tape. There is that, and I hate this about a player. Yeah. There's that some good and then some bad. And I mean bad, I mean that there's things that he will struggle with. There's sometimes these linemen that just don't look like they play with the balance and the, it's like they get into a little bit of survival mode. Yeah. They get knocked off balance and they kind of spin on one foot and then they're able to kind of get, maybe that is good balance if you kind of get knocked around a little bit. But you're right. The way that they use him, they use him like he's a really, really good athlete.
Yeah.
You know, and I think some of the second level stuff, you see him get second level, but his head's down. He kind of misses the guy, and guy might go behind him. And I was a little bit more of he just looked real clumsy.
Yeah.
And that bothered me. I didn't like, I was seeing a guy whose head was down and didn't have the power. And so that's why I had him there in the third round. I didn't really particularly like him as much as I've mentioned, like, the Proctors, the Lomus, and those guys like that who I have above him.
Brian, let me ask you a question. When you building your board for offensive linemen, do you account for the tax that come along with what O-line is, or are you just kind of grading them on your own? Because in real life, Brian, you're not wrong. Freeling is like a day 2 kind of guy. I got a second on him, but if he falls to the third, I won't be blown away.
Oh, he's like not going to. You know what's going to happen, VOCH? He's not going to fall to the third.
Yeah,
I mean, he's not. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
You're playing you're absolutely doing it the right way. I just personally I'm from the school, and I'm not saying this about anybody that does this. I'm just saying that where would you feel comfortable taking him?
Yeah.
I get proven wrong every day watching players play. I'm also get proven right, okay, well, that guy wasn't as good, so I kind of have a feeling that he will go much higher. Hell, he might go in the end of the first round, and then then I'll go, wow, well, and then I would say it would be very similar to how Travis Frederick, it would be very similar to like Travis Frederick, who I had in the third round. And, I'm wrong about that. Travis Frederick, when he was taken, in the first round there, be it a second round grade where he was taken, he was a much better player than that. And maybe this Freeling will be that type of guy. But me personally, I struggled with him. But as you guys know, following us along, I struggle with the guys that tend to maybe lack a little power, maybe lack a little quickness, maybe lack a little athletic ability. I struggle with those guys. This guy's liable to play, 10, 12 years, and you could be absolutely right about him. I feel more comfortable taking him in the third than I do in the second.
Now, Brian, if he wasn't 6'7", like if he was 6'4" or something, I would just put his ass at center if it's me. Because I think, I think he kind of fits that build a little bit for me. I don't know what his arm length looks like, but you could be a center with long arms. But I think he's a guy that's going to need some help. That's gonna need some combos to really, that's when he's playing.
I agree.
His best ball is when he's comboing or kind of blocking people from the side. But when he has to kind of lead the way, that's when he starts to fumbling and tumbling a little bit, Brian.